Lovely to see you.
Great to see you.
Thank you.
Where are you located, sir?
But we're in Scotland, just outside Glasgow.
Excellent. The accent was a dead giveaway.
Yeah. We've had a couple of American guests on, including Philip Ramirez, who you know. So I'll try my best to speak a little bit slower than usual. Yeah, it can certainly be challenging. It can be challenging.
I love the accent. Alan Cosgrove is a friend of mine, and his accent has softened over the years.
Yeah.
But it's still one of those things that if you get him on a roll, you got to slow him down every now and then. But I appreciate it. I've never been to Glasgow, but I've just heard fabulous things. I look forward to maybe being able to visit there one day.
It's I think you always appreciate, or you always sort of covet maybe what you don't have, but as a city, I love it. I really do. We're maybe 15 minutes, 20 minutes away, but yeah, it's a lovely place. Talking about Philip Ramirez, he actually he introduced you to me and actually called you his strength sensei, which I thought was really cool.
That's excellent.
So when he said that, I thought, yep, this is definitely someone who I want to get onto the show. So thank you so much for making the time for us.
Absolutely. No, it's great to have the opportunity.
Okay. Do you know, when we were chatting back and forth via email and things, I'd said about having quite a relaxed manner on the podcast. But when I thought about it, I thought that your knowledge is going to be really, really specific on this. So I have actually, for the very first time on the show, taken some questions just so that I don't miss anything that I wanted to ask you about. So yeah, going to do something a wee bit different today.
Perfect.
Okay.
I'm good with it.
Brilliant. So you are the Director of Education for StrongFirst.
Yes.
Can you tell us a wee bit about StrongFirst and what's involved in the role that you have?
Absolutely. So essentially, I do curriculum development and progression of our instructors, and the curriculum things we teach, editing and updating the manuals, staying in constant contact with members of our leadership. We have a kind of a tiered structure within StrongFirst with master instructors, senior instructors, team leaders, and then the rest of the field of instructors. And these people lead teams and teach for us at various events.
Yeah.
And so I work with them on an ongoing basis to progress the curriculum, drills, standards, and their teaching and presentation skills.
And a wee bit about StrongFirst. The Pavel Satsolin is the sort of owner of the organisation, I would imagine.
Yes.
How did you get introduced to him, and can you tell us a wee bit about him?
Oh, sure. So I was running a hospital fitness center in northwestern Pennsylvania, and a friend of mine came in and said, "Hey, you need to check out this stuff by this guy named Pavel." Yeah. And this is 98, 99.
Okay.
And so, yeah, don't let the baby face fool you. I've been doing this a while.
Yeah, for sure.
And so he's like, "Yeah, you got to check out this stuff by Pavel." And so I ordered one of Pavel's first books, Power to the People, which was a minimalist strength training approach, a deadlift and a press, essentially, and a lot of information in there that was really counter to the hype of the day, which was very much still bodybuilding based. Yeah. Body part splits and going to failure and all this other stuff. And Pavel was the antithesis of all of that. And so I got interested, and then they came out with they started selling kettlebells, and the first kettlebell book that Pavel did, the Russian Kettlebell Challenge book. And so I got that. True story. I got it. I read it. I'm like, wow, this is really good information, but I can do all of that with a dumbbell. And I threw it in a drawer.
Yep.
but it was scratching at the back of my head the whole time. And so eventually, a couple months later, I pulled the book out and I start reading it again. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to give this a try. And so I hooked up a dumbbell with about 50 pounds and tried one of the snatch routines that he had in there. Of course, I was doing a dumbbell snatch, not a kettlebell snatch.
Yeah.
And as I like to joke, when the EMS revived me, I said, I think I should go get some training in this.
Yeah.
Which is a joke. The EMS did not have to come. But I certainly appreciated by the end of that workout that I should probably go get some training in this. And so I went to the second ever kettlebell certification that Pavel taught in February of 2002.
Okay.
And then I was invited back to be a senior instructor in April of 2003. And so I've been traveling and teaching kettlebell training and working with Pavel since 2003. And certainly been, as the old Grateful Dead song would say, what a long, strange trip it's been. And I remember really well when I first got involved with kettlebells, everybody was saying, it's a fad. It's, they're going to be gone. And I'm like, well, here I am 17 years later. It's taken me all over the world, and it's still my primary form of personal fitness training, my primary form of teaching. It's a lot of what I do. And so, specifically to Pavel himself, tremendous guy. He's just a wonderful guy. He's a incredible depth of knowledge. He will usually blow by me in the first 5 minutes of a conversation, and I've got to ask him to kind of slow down and go back and, what was that thing you said? Yeah. And try to catch up. But as CEO and kind of leader of the organization, he's just tremendous to be able to work with and to follow his work and things that he's progressing on.
I think he's probably. I was introduced to him properly when he appeared on Joe Rogan's podcast, and there's a number of the episodes of Joe Rogan that I've listened to a number of times, but his episode in particular was one of the ones that I must have listened to 4 or 5 times now, and talking about his breadth of knowledge, just every time listening, he said that, and he said that, and just picking a different thing up each time. His knowledge on not just kettles but in fitness in general is quite unbelievable.
Definitely. And that, the Russians' approach, to give you an example, there's a school, and the name of the school is like the University for Evaluating Special Problems in Jumping.
Okay, wow.
So there's like a school that's dedicated to perfecting jumping. Yep. So their approach is a bit more detailed, and they definitely take the deep dive and have some tremendous information.
Yeah. Do you know, or is there a general acceptance on where the kettlebell or the design of the equipment actually came from? I know, I believe that it's a Russian origin, but how did it come about?
It's well, there are many different versions out there of where the kettlebell came from. I know that it appeared in the Russian dictionary in the 16th century, I believe.
Okay, wow.
So the term Giria, I believe appeared in the 16th century dictionaries in Russia. So it's been around for quite a while. If the original weights were a pood and a half, and 2 poods.
Okay.
And so that's 16 kilo, 24 kilo, 32 kilo.
Right.
And so what I heard early on is these were the weights that were used for measuring crops, where we use bushels, they used poods. It wasn't, didn't take too much imagination to picture a bunch of, guys, farmers standing around, and before I can lift that more times than you can, sort of mindset developed. And there's a history of kettlebells in a variety of cultures. The nature of the design, cannonball with a handle on it. I mean, it's a very deceivingly simple design.
Yep. Yep.
And but that design has tremendous benefits, and it is a unique tool. And I I I it's been my primary form of training now for 19 years. So
It's I certainly remember being in the gym and them just appearing. I don't really know what they're used for, or maybe you've seen someone using it. But certainly over the last few years, it's well, again, the last 20 odd years, it's gradually became uh, a much more accepted and a much more used method of physical fitness and working out. You're going to be biased here. We know that. We're talking to a kettlebell guy. What would you say were the main benefits of kettles over? And again, I don't like using the traditional sense of it of working out, but dumbbells, barbells, we still see them as being traditional and kettlebells being used. So, what are the main benefits over traditional?
certainly. So right off the bat, the design that I was talking about, the thick handle and offset center of gravity. So you pick up a dumbbell, you pick up a barbell, that's going to center with your hand. Whereas the center of mass of the kettlebell is going to be 6 to 8 inches beyond your hand, or 6 to 8 inches laid over on the other side. So that offset center of mass makes the weight far more alive in your hand. It's something that you have to control and work with. The thick handle trains a lot of grip in just naturally in the forms of when you're swinging and snatching and doing stuff. You're going to get a lot more grip training. And there's this unique loaded eccentric position that we can get into. When you hike the kettlebell back on your swings, cleans, snatches, things of that nature, you really have, I like to joke that you can only swing a barbell between your legs once. You'll decide that was a bad idea, not do that anymore. But the kettlebell, because you can get into that loaded eccentric position, I can produce, I've been on a force plate with just swinging a 24 kilo bell, but I was producing 3 to 3.5 times my body weight eccentric load in that bottom position. And that's a great return on investment. Whereas with traditional plyometrics, which of course can get much higher in the number of times body weight load that you'll take. But to swing a 53-pound weight and to get 3.5 times my body weight eccentric load in that position, where you're learning to absorb and redirect force very rapidly, I think I just described athletics in a very succinct manner, where you're absorbing and redirecting force. And so we get to train that in this rhythmically repetitive manner with this tremendous eccentric load. So I think those things just alone provide a lot of benefit. And that offset center of mass, when we're doing things like get-ups and we're military press or things like that, that offset center of mass up to a certain point will actually guide me into better positions. It'll assist me in having a better lockout for my get-up and my press. Then you reach a point where it's heavy enough, the center of mass is far enough away to where it's a challenge and something that you really have to work with. And so it just continues to build some pretty unique strength profiles.
A couple of things that you mentioned there, I had actually planned to discuss later in the conversation, but let's jump in. There's a functionality, and again, maybe it's quite a lazy word to use. You can describe it better than I could, but there's a functionality about kettles that someone like myself, who's sort of heavily involved in martial arts, even up to professional level, the kettlebell seems to be the go-to exercise now for any type of fighter, any type of martial artist, because of that functionality. Can we have a wee chat about that and how you see it fitting into those things?
Absolutely. So we used to have I believe it was a Secret Service personnel who said kettlebell training was the closest thing you could get to fighting without getting hit.
Yep.
And so that, and that one, a couple of the first groups that were really interested in kettlebell training were martial artists, military, law enforcement, because they recognized very quickly the benefits of working with this tool. So in addition to the thick handle, offset center of mass, the loaded eccentric, when you're doing things like the one arm swing, one side snatch, things of that nature, you're handling that off center load, an offset load. And so the bell's trying to twist you out of position. You're trying to keep it from twisting you. So it's providing this kind of 3D strength where we're performing these anti-rotation things. Then we're performing exercises like the get up, where we're really being loaded from a bunch of different angles and positions, building some good resilience in the shoulders. Important for, I think, every martial artist, grappler, combat athlete. And so there's a ton of stuff going on there. And with things like swings and snatches and clean and jerk, we're really building power and conditioning at the same time. And so when you need to practice your art and you need to be drilling and working on your skill, your training needs to be efficient. Your training needs to be something that gets you the benefit that you're looking for, so that you can go do the thing that you want to be better at. And so kettlebell training really delivers there, because you can put together a very efficient package of minimal number of drills that are really going to benefit you on the mat or in the ring, or in your own practice. So I think that the ability to train power, conditioning, those various angles, and resilience, it's good package.
Yeah, for sure. That question and the answer that you've given sort of fits into the question before regarding comparing the two, because if working on the kettle press, for example, the first thing I, as a very, very amateur kettlebell practitioner, but more of an experienced martial artist, the first thing I look there when I'm going to press the kettle is, what's my feet doing? How's my base? And straight away, there's comparisons between the two, and there's a reminder that to deliver a punch or to pull somebody in or push someone away, you need the base that the kettlebell exercises really do help with. They really help with. They're really coordinated in what both of them are trying to get us to do.
Definitely. And so, things like the clean and the swing, the press, everything starts at the foundation, establishing that proper base. But then, because we're driving through the ground every time we do a swing or a snatch or whatever the case may be, we're really developing the ability to root much faster. That's usually something that can take a student quite a while to begin to really embrace. But you start doing it automatically within the swing, because if you don't, you're going to get pulled off base, and the kettlebell will be swinging you instead of you swinging the kettlebell. And so it does have a lot of those kind of just intrinsic kind of benefits, where and we call it the what the heck effect. So we had people that started doing their kettlebell training, and then they were setting a pull-up PR, even though they hadn't been working on pull-ups, or they were setting a squat PR. They hadn't been working on their barbell squat. So we just started calling it the what the heck effect. Like, I'm doing this thing that doesn't seem to be related, but all of a sudden I'm better at these other things. And it's not just that I'm lazy, but I want, if one thing will give me 3, then I'll do the one thing.
Oh, sure, of course.
I don't need to do the other 3. So again, that efficiency and carryover, the impact of the kettlebell training really delivers.
Again, you're saying so many things that there's little light bulbs going off in my head. Again, it's just coming from the depth of knowledge that you have in talking about this subject. A friend of mine was very keen on testing his personal bests on the bench press, for example, but he wanted to improve those by simply studying the simple and sinister protocols from StrongFirst, and had recorded his sort of personal best on the bench, and then had dedicated a number of weeks or months in improving his kettlebell swing, his Turkish get up, etc., to see how those benefited his lifts. Now, the problem is that COVID-19 decided to rear its ugly head, and that little sort of system that he had going is kind of falling away at the moment. But again, I'm sitting with a technician here, so let's get technical. How does the different kettlebell protocols that we can all study, how do they improve our bench press or our any other more traditional personal best weight lift that we look for?
So for something more specifically to the upper body lifts, so to speak. So if we think about the bench press, obviously your ability to properly position the scapula to actively lower the bar into position and then have that smooth drive off the chest. And so we kind of refer to it as being a strength professional. So you can see lots of strength amateurs out there, and watching a strength amateur bench press is very much like being in a car with somebody who's trying to learn how to drive the stick. Yep. You know, they're gonna hit first gear and you get jerked forward and then you get jerked back, and you know, it's not a smooth ride.
Yeah.
But you get in the car with a Formula One race driver, you don't even feel the gears shift, you just go faster. Mm-hmm. And so the strength professional is the Formula One race driver. It's you don't feel the transition between the muscles, the weight just moves better. Whereas the strength amateur is kind of one muscle at a time. They try and drive it off the chest, then there's nothing behind it, so they end up doing self CPR for 5 or 6 reps. Right? Yep. So when you practice things like the get up, you are learning how to stabilize and position your scapula. You're learning how to center that load through your body. You're going to bring up the stability ability around the shoulder and other joints because of the way you're being loaded in all those different positions. And strength is not stability. So strength is the ability to produce force. Stability is the ability to control that force that's moving through that joint. And the get up is going to give you a lot better stability ability through a lot of different ranges. And that potentially will carry over to something like the bench press or a military press or a punch, or whatever the case may be. And smoothly going through all of those transitions is going to give you a little bit more of that strength professional smooth transitions between the muscle groups and positions. So all of that carries over into better performance.
Of course. A little quick question, and again, you were mentioning the handle on the kettle and obviously helping with the grip. What's your thoughts on the pros and cons, or why do we have different shaped kettles? Because maybe it's just to accommodate or be more accommodating to more people who are starting out. I don't know, but you get kettles with the thicker handle, you get thinner handle, metal, plastic, etc., etc. If you were to pick a perfect kettle, describe that for us, if you could.
It's the cast kettlebell that StrongFirst produces them right now. Perform Better has a good line of them. Those are two of the first that popped in my mind. I prefer the traditional cast kettlebell, where the handle has a little more shape to it, because then you have good horns on the handles, allows you to do goblet squats. The thicker handle is going to be a little bit better when I want to do my bottoms up drills. It is going to load my grip more. The main other type of kettlebell is, and so real quick, you're going to run into some different designs as far as that cast kettlebell is concerned. And there'll be a more distance between the handle and the body of the bell. There'll be a little less distance. There is kind of an ideal distance where the kettlebell is going to rest just below the wrist. If it's too far down, it gets a little awkward. If it's too high, it could potentially force the wrist to have to extend and be very uncomfortable. So there is kind of an ideal position where the bell is going to rest. and that has to do with the distance between the handle and the bell. The other main type of bell that you're going to see are the competition bells.
Okay.
Kettlebell is a sport that is internationally contested. So typically max repetition snatches in 10 minutes, max repetition jerks in 10 minutes, or a long cycle competition where you're doing a clean before every jerk. That is brutal.
Yeah.
And those GS, it's called gear voice sport. Giri is kettlebell, Girovoy is kettlebell lifter. Also and Russian translation is also just strongman.
Okay.
So kettlebell and strength were so synonymous that their term for a strongman was a kettlebell lifter.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
So these competition bells are designed to help optimize those lifts. So the handle is a little bit thinner, so there's not as much grip stress. The bells tend to be all the same size. They're kind of hollowed out so that they weigh a particular amount, but they have the same size going through the different progressions. I actually think having different sizes is a benefit, but to each their own.
Yep, yep.
And these GS athletes put up some amazing numbers. The number of snatches they'll knock out in 10 minutes is just mind-boggling to me, and it's with one hand switch.
Yep.
So they'll do 120 reps on one arm and then switch and do the same thing on the other arm. I mean, it's amazing. It truly is. And so that's the other main type of bell that tend to have a stainless steel sort of handle, whereas the cast bells are going to have either a powder coating or an E coating that has a little different feel to it. I have a 24 kilo bell sitting on the ground here next to me. Yep. That is 19 years old and was the first bell I ever got way back when. And so I have some competition bells. I just like the cast better.
Yeah. I'm certainly not asking you to be, again, it's something that I noticed when Pavel was on with Joe Rogan about being very polite and respectful, not to criticize something else. Mm-hmm. That's certainly something that I'm not asking you to do and wouldn't put you in that position. However,
having said that,
the kettles that have on it, for example, have the sort of gorilla face or the Star Wars design. Mm-hmm. Does that play any functional part, and is it to a detriment? Right, obviously, I'm not sure it's going to improve the kettle, but is it detrimental? They just look the part, or?
It's definitely for looks. And I have never used one, so this is a completely ignorant opinion. Having said that, if the shape of the face, because I think the gorilla type kettlebell in particular projects out a good bit from the side of the kettlebell. Yeah. If that is throwing off that center of mass, then that's a detriment. That's not something that I would really want in my kettlebell. They're fun. I can definitely see the appeal of having one sitting in the gym and being an attention grabber. But if it's changing that center of mass and making it a little more unwieldy, and for things like a military press, like I said, that offset center of mass is very beneficial up to a certain point, and the more you disturb that, you could change the benefit that you're going to get for that drill.
Okay. The next question I have for you might be a fun question for you. If you had to pick 3 kettlebell exercises and you were stuck with those 3 forever, which 3 would you pick? And then maybe discuss why.
Certainly. So I'm going to cheat and I'm going to add a 4th drill anyway.
Absolutely. Brilliant.
Get up, swing, snatch, clean and jerk.
Okay.
So, and like you can get very minimalist with this. So the get up, like we already talked about, strength in a bunch of different ranges, getting the stabilizers nice and smart so that they do a good job. Really builds resilience. Just a really great drill. The swing, grips, hips, and power, and conditioning. And for the snatch, grips, hips, power, and conditioning. Clean and jerk, really an efficient one-stop shop. If you're doing something like long cycle, clean and jerk, just tremendous power and conditioning, and that, again, that efficiency where I can spend 20 minutes to a half hour on my kettlebell practice and get everything that I need. And I've got lots more time to go hit the mat or hit the katas and practice. So that's where I would go.
The get up is something that I've seen done a number of ways. What are the main, if you can, and again, this, feel free to get as technical and as in depth as you wish here. Starting from a position laying on your back to then going all the way up and all the way down. Can you talk us through that? So if I were to say, well, why are we doing this part of that? Why are we doing this part? And as I say, really feel welcome to be as technical or in depth on that as you can be, please.
Are you going to play the video with this?
Yes.
So give me a second here. What's the point in having video if you don't use it?
This is such a treat. Thank you. Yeah.
So if I'm getting started in a get up, I'm going to establish my sweat angel position. So that's going to give me about 45-degree angles. Good starting point. We adjust from there. If the arm is up, the leg is up. The down arm, I'm going to go thumb up or palm up. And what this does is it externally rotates the shoulder to a certain extent, which is going to make it easier to connect into the lat and maintaining the good scapular and shoulder position.
Yep.
If I turn the palm down, I internally rotate my shoulder, and now I have to kind of overcome the shoulder to get to the elbow. So thumb up. In fact, I did my get-ups for years with my hand up like this, without really appreciating how good it was at the time. And the reason I did that was, one of the mistakes you'll see is somebody will do this to get started in their get-up, and that kind of shrug and internal rotation, not the best position for your shoulder. So this thumb up, or even this position, forces me to really use the drive from this foot through the stable midsection and pull myself up to this shoulder. Now here, and we get very concerned with the arm that's holding the kettlebell for good reason. We don't want to drop it, and we want to be in good position. But what's happening at this base shoulder is really important as well. I don't want to come up and be in hanging out at the beach position, right? This is Jersey Shore. This is not doing a get up. Told that joke in New Jersey. Yes. So from here, I want to push that ground away. I'm as concerned about stabilizing and packing or connecting this shoulder as I am connecting this shoulder. So from here, I got to get to the hand. And so I'm going to point my fingers and take myself up into this position. Again, I'm creating that externally rotated position where I'm twisting that shoulder in, connecting my lat to my arm and hip, so that all of this is one unit, so that as I push down through the ground here, I can sweep this leg nice and efficient. From here, I need to shift my weight and get to half kneeling. Now I step this foot into position. Gives me the opportunity to create a perfect lunge every time. The other alternative is to windshield wiper this rear shin, and then I probably have to adjust the front foot just a little bit anyway. Then I'm going to stand up, and I'm not going to do that because I'll come out of view.
That's okay.
But I want to maintain that nice locked elbow, neutral wrist, great overhead position. So I stand up, I come back down. Now I've got to reverse whichever however I got into this position, I need to reverse it. So that could be the windshield wiper here, or it could be the step. Now I got to find the ground. To find the ground, I'm going to use my thigh as a guide, because what I don't want to do is reach behind me like that. I want to come out so that I have this nice positioning. Have a seat. Come back to that nice stable shoulder position. Unspin the hand just a little bit. Back to the elbow, and then I'm going to push myself away to return to my back.
I'll let you get seated again. Now, this is why doing the podcast is such a treat. It really is, because if someone said to me, "Do you know the get up? Could you show me and teach me the get up?" I until 3 or 4 minutes ago, I would have been confident that I could have demonstrated that properly. To have you, I'm like a kid in a sweetie shop here. To get you to actually demonstrate that, and just the bits that are so obvious when you say them, but to actually see you perform it is amazing. Thank you so much for doing that. That was
Absolutely. No, it's I think there's and that's, I mean, 17 years into teaching this, and just as if you were to try to teach me something related to your martial art, you've refined the process of getting a beginner to do something like a straight punch or a front kick. I think would still be like the two universal things you're going to do in martial arts. You've refined that process to where you can get a beginner getting dialed into those movements much faster. And that's the journey we've been on for the last 17 years. And Pavel, did you see Free Solo about Alex?
Yeah.
Tremendous. Like I watched it like 3 times, almost in a row, where I'm just like, his ability to break down every move that he was going to do on this free climb was just mind blowing. But there's the scene in there where he says one of his mother's favorite sayings is "good enough isn't." And good enough isn't as far as our teaching progressions and things like that. We are always looking to refine our cueing and our coaching and how we're doing all of our techniques. And when you go through something like the StrongFirst Level 1 certification, there's only 6 things that are taught. But we're an inch wide and a mile deep on those things. And so we take that long-term minimalist approach almost to an extreme. You can go to other certifications and learn 50 different drills. Cool. We're going to stay an inch wide, a mile deep, and we're going to constantly refine coaching, cueing, and techniques. And it's what I enjoy.
It has to be the way to teach properly. I believe, and obviously from what you're saying there, you and the StrongFirst organization strongly believe that as well. There's so many videos and coaching books and YouTube videos and things available now. We've talked a wee bit about the good stuff. What tips would you give someone starting in kettlebells to avoid injury or avoid creating bad technique right from the beginning? Or what pitfalls should we avoid?
So one of the other things I do is called the functional movement screen, or I work with Gray Cook and functional movement systems. And so I think having a clean slate as far as your movement is concerned is important. Identifying things that could be an issue, or that you just need to be able to move a little bit better, control a little bit better before you start taking on the load of something like a kettlebell. Like I said, 3.5 times body weight eccentric load in that bottom position. I think clearing the slate is a good idea. If you have pain, get that addressed. Too many people who are in pain are looking for an exercise solution, and that's not an exercise problem. That's a health problem. Okay. So get the pain taken care of. Get that addressed. Will exercise end up being part of that answer? Yes, but it's probably not where you're going to start with that answer. So get the pain addressed, get your movement clean, work with a coach. Work with a coach. I'm getting just a little delay here. I apologize. No, I don't know if it's me.
Go. You were saying. Good. Yep. Go. You were saying. Yeah.
So get a coach, even just for a couple sessions. And I've been doing online training for several years now. And so I felt very comfortable when COVID hit because I was already offering online services and things like that. But work with a coach. Just a little bit of time spent learning the proper technique right off the bat will save you months of trying to unlearn something that you've grooved over, individual practice. Yeah. When you don't have the opportunity to work with a coach, then just take your time. Build the get up one step at a time. Get really good at getting to the elbow. Then get good at going from the elbow to the hand. Practice those unloaded body weight and build the steps with load one step at a time. In reference to the swing and all of the ballistics, spend time on the kettlebell deadlift. Don't blow past that. I've given lots of sessions to lots of different kettlebell instructors and certified people and people wanting to get certified. And I have yet to not be able to improve somebody's swing by going back to the deadlift and making sure.
In what way would that benefit? In what way?
So the deadlift is our slow motion opportunity to perfect the hip hinge we're going to use in the swing. Yeah. And so just like doing a slow motion kata allows you the opportunity to drill a kick or a punch or a particular movement, the deadlift is that opportunity within kettlebell training. So always coming back to that, learning how to connect the lats, learning how to sit into the hips, create that perfect athletic hinge position, just has tremendous carryover to everything you're going to do in all of your other ballistic drills where we're going to use that hip hinge again and again.
Yeah. This might be a silly question. The get up without the kettle, which I suppose is contradictory to everything we've been talking about, but is it good advice to, you might just simply say, yes, it absolutely is, or you may say no. Should you start with the body loaded when practicing the get up or without the kettle and then introduce the kettle once the techniques, because the weight must eventually affect the technique as well if it's not good.
100%. So weight, increasing load is how we bulletproof our technique.
Okay.
But you have to have a technique to bulletproof before you start adding, a lot of load. And so we teach the get up first as just a body weight drill. And we do that because, and I've had this experience many, many times. You show the get up to a new student and they look back at you and go, well, I'm never going to remember all those steps. Yeah. There's too much going on. But then you break it down, you have them do it like a kata, and you just have them go through, get to the elbow, get to the hand, sweep the leg. You just kind of run it. Then we actually do something of balancing a shoe or a yoga block on the fist, and then have you perform the get up without dropping the shoe or the yoga block. Yeah. And we do that simply to make sure all of your transitions are smooth. If your transitions aren't smooth, you could really run into trouble because if you don't have a smooth transition of sweeping the leg to get into that half kneeling position and the kettlebell pitches forward, yep, that could be a problem. I'd rather have you drop a shoe or a yoga block than a kettlebell.
Yep, for sure.
And you might only ever do one or 2 shoe get-ups in your life, just to make sure you've got the transitions.
Yeah.
And then absolutely progress into load. Load is how we're going to bulletproof our technique. It's how we're going to challenge our technique as we go further and progress further into that drill.
Okay, Brett, I won't keep you much longer, but I have one more question, or one more exercise to discuss, and that's the squat. So there's a number of variations of squatting using the kettle. If you can talk to us a little bit about the main benefits of a couple of the more well-known variations, and how the kettle can add a little bit different, rather than using the bar, for example, or just a bodyweight squat.
Certainly. So I would start right off the bat with the goblet squat, the ability to pick the kettlebell up into that goblet squat position, which aims the elbows down, which is going to allow you to connect the elbow to the vastus medialis, that teardrop muscle that's just inside and above your knee. That being able to touch those 2 points and then create space and really open up the hips is it's the starting point for every squat variation out there. So that drill in particular, everybody should be good at the goblet squat. It has a place at the table with any person that we're talking about training. Once you get past that, we do bring the kettlebell into the rack position. And whether it's single bell, which again is going to be a little bit more anti-rotation, the load is, you can't handle as much load because a really big bell is actually really hard to keep in the rack, and you end up doing some weird things as far as lifting the bell off of the chest. And that's one of the things that when we bring that kettlebell into the rack position, I want that connection to the body.
Okay. Yep.
And if we were training fighters, we're not going to be in this position too often, right? Because as we open up, we expose ourselves. We want compressed. If we're training grapplers and people that are going to need to know how to still breathe when somebody's trying to choke the life out of them or compress the life out of them, having to bear that load is really important. So whether it's single bell or double bell, we want to keep that good connection in our kettlebell front squat, which is the quick transition from the goblet squat to the kettlebell front squat. We have had power lifters who were 1,000-pound squatters who felt that double 40 kilo was enough on the kettlebell front squat. So your return on investment, and I keep coming back to that term because it makes the most sense to me. If I can swing a 53-pound weight and get 3.5 times body weight eccentric load, I'm good with swinging a 53-pound weight, right? But for squatting, if I can get double 32s in the rack and really work through a good set of 5 kettlebell front squats, I'm going to get a lot of squatting benefit without having to take on 300, 400 pounds of load. Other variations. So another benefit of the kettlebell front squat in particular is this great wrist position. When you're training military, law enforcement, and grapplers and people for whom their hands are important, getting into the Olympic lifting position can be very challenging, and it can really stress the wrist and create some issues. So that just ergonomic, really solid rack position, neutral wrist has some great benefits within that as well. Now, I am a little bit of a squataholic. When I was powerlifting, I love to squat. I love it. I mean, I would squat heavy 2 to 3 days a week, which most people won't do. I loved it. I'd spend all day in the squat rack if I could. Of course, it's been a few years since I powerlifted, and I don't have any barbells at home, so kettlebell front squats fit the bill for me. So I love barbell squatting. Okay. So this is in no way should this be seen as an anti barbell squat sort of thing. But there's a lot of skill to be built to really barbell back squat well, whether you're using a low bar position or a high bar position. there's a lot of time that you're going to spend learning how to do that well. Because the loads are getting much greater, there is an increased risk. I know that I can get a pair of kettlebells in the rack and I center with the weight very easily. With the barbell, I've got to learn how to coordinate my structure around that load differently, and know that I can do it without the risk. And so if you're an Ollie lifter, you're going to do some overhead squats and things like that. That's a little more specific to the sport. Most people do not have the mobility or ability to really overhead squat well, so that's something that's kind of set off to the side from an exercise and load perspective. Yeah. So,
do you know, it's I promise this will be the last question. I know we're working on a time difference and your day's just beginning. So let's very quickly, or in fact, there's no rush from my end. Let's talk about the foot position on the squat. Keeping the toes facing forward should, I believe, eventually lead to a better sort of functioning hip joint and a lot more stable through the legs. Would I be right in saying that, or how would you describe the best way to have the feet during a squatting exercise?
There is a foot position that is best for you and your structure.
Okay.
And actually for very few people is that going to be feet straight ahead.
Okay.
Those people do exist. I'm not one of them. Right. And being Scottish, you're probably not one of them either. As Stu McGill has oft quoted, the differences between an Asian hip and a Scottish hip are like two of his prime examples of how different people squat. Yep. So a little bit about me. I have high alpha angles on my femurs. So that means my femoral head does not change shape when it should. Okay. Kind of square peg, round hole sort of thing.
Right, okay.
So instead of being able to spin my femur in the acetabulum the way that you would if you had a properly shaped hip, whatever. If you have and I don't want to say normal, because there's such variation in hip structure that I think normal is kind of hard to come by as far as hips are concerned. But when you have a high alpha angle, for example, you're going to impinge on the hip joint, on the acetabulum, labrum and stuff like that. And when the hip stops, the back starts. So if you run out of room at your hip, your body is going to get it from somewhere. And that's typically from giving up the spine. So for most people who don't know what their hip structure is, if you force them into a straight ahead position, and I can actually stand back up and demonstrate a couple of things here. Why not?
Please do. Please do.
We're on video, so let's do it. Yep. So and I'm going to use the hinge as an example. So getting into my kettlebell deadlift or something like that. So if I go with my feet straight ahead, and what I want you watching for is when my low back changes shape. So make sure my shirt's tucked in here so you can see. And so if I go from this position and I go to hip hinge, you see what's starting to happen there?
Yep.
I can feel it. Like my back, I'm starting to move from my back. You can see that change.
Yep.
Right? That's not much of a hinge, is it?
No.
So now, if I turn my feet out the way that I prefer to have them, tell me when my low back changes shape.
A lot later, if at all.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So which hinge would you rather have access to?
The second one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and for me, I'm going to show you what my foot position is. So if I'm getting ready to swing or squat, that's my foot position.
Okay. Yep.
Now, that looks like a pretty extreme amount of turnout, but again, 62-degree alpha angle, 59, 60-degree alpha angle in this hip. If I don't turn out, then I impinge.
Okay. Yep.
So in this position, I mean, I can squat, hinge, do things really well. And, you know, in addition, I mean, I have in my right hip, my anterior labrum's completely torn, anterior superior labrum's torn with 2 paralabral cysts, 3 millimeters and 5 millimeters in size, in case anybody's interested. And so, I mean, I chewed up my hip trying to do things with my feet straight ahead.
Okay.
And so when I went back to, and I always naturally turned my feet up. So when I went back to doing that, all of my trouble went away.
Yep.
And so individualizing the foot position so that I optimize the ability of the hip to move allows me to move without loading my low back.
Yeah. It's a brilliant way. I mean, certainly this is another main benefit of having people like yourself on the show, because it allows, I think the worst thing you can do as a teacher or instructor or person actually is to be stuck in a certain way without ever allowing change to happen because you've got a certain way of thinking. And I must admit that having the toes facing, now again, when I was looking at the angle there, I would still have said your toes were relatively straightforward. I mean, I'm maybe talking about people squatting out at this angle, but I must admit and hold my hands up and say I do encourage, even just with bodyweight squats in a martial arts class, I do encourage the toes to be as straightforward as possible until I spoke to you, and that's why you should hear from the experts and be open to change and to being educated by someone like you. So it's definitely something I'm going to consider for sure.
I absolutely appreciate that. And, you know, one of the things you're going to hear from various people is, you know, I'll start with my feet straight ahead, but by the end of my squats, my feet are turned out. Well, start there. Start where you ended up, because there's a reason your feet ended up there. And going back into the, you know, the movement screen and things, other things that I do, I will have looked at some of your fundamental movements and have an idea of whether this could be muscular.
Mm-hmm.
There are some people whose feet will spin out because they have a simple muscular restriction. I think that's the minority of people, personally. I've found a lot more people that have structural differences at their hip, and you'll run into people who have one foot turned out like this and one foot turned out like that.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, I used to try to fight those and get them into the same turnout.
Mm-hmm.
Might not be the best idea for them. So definitely individualizing the foot position, and oddly enough, the goblet squat and using kind of a prying goblet squat can be one of those things that really helps you find that individual foot position. And I have an article on StrongFirst.com. I think the title is something like "Adjust Your Sails." It's about the lock and rock, the drill that I use to find that individual foot position, and that's a good way to get started. But because I suffered from trying to do things with my feet straight ahead, I am fairly passionate about allowing an individual foot position, and makes a big difference.
Okay. Right, Brett, just before we finish, do you want to give us a little rundown of your own personal website? And I know for a fact you're on Instagram, but is there any other ways that people can follow you or reach out to you?
Best StrongFirst.com. I have a variety of articles and things that are on there, and I answer some questions on the community forum and things of that nature. We have a pretty active forum, very active forum actually. So I do have my own website, appliedstrength.com. And then, yeah, like you said, Instagram's good. I think it's B Jones SFG. I don't even know my own Instagram handle. I think it's at B Jones SFG.
When I was looking for you after Philip had put me on to you, I just typed in Brett Jones and up you came on Instagram. So people will find you for sure.
Good. Yeah, I think it's at B Jones SFG, but yeah, if they can just search Brett Jones, they'll find it. And that's been over the last couple of years. I've just tried to do a little bit more on Instagram versus Facebook, and things of that nature. I'm on Facebook as well, but I tend not to use it as much. But yeah.
Okay, so, Brett Jones, thank you so much. As I say, just having access to speak to someone like yourself on the show with such specific sort of knowledge on the subjects, it's a real treat. So thank you so much, sir. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you for the opportunity to talk and to talk to your audience.
Brilliant. Okay, sir, have a wonderful day.
Thank you. You as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Take care. Thanks, Brett.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye now.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.